or three, hopefully, out there hustling and grinding and getting your thing on, which is very good. Today on the show, super excited. We back into the world of action sports. Love it. The world of action sports. We have some good guests on so far, but today's guest is actually understands especially more of the content side, the social, the tech sort of side of things, and especially the intersection of commerce when it comes to content as well for the mainstream. Today, ladies and gentlemen, introducing Justin Cafiero. How are you, mate?
I'm doing well, man. Thanks.
So, Justin, I'm going to quick little read off here. Content director of the Dew Tour, but you've come through a pretty interesting path of action sports, the Red Bull world, the Burton snowboard sort of Illuminati mafia, which has made its way around into the ether of good stuff, which I'm always a fan of because then I know snowboarders are just seeping their tentacles in more than skiers, which makes me feel good. And then obviously now under the Adventure Sports Network content director at the Dew Tour. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing great. Yeah, it's been a long road. I kind of pinch myself sometimes. It's been, over a decade at this point, but just super lucky to have turned basically my passion for snowboarding into something that I can call a, somewhat successful career. So it's been a great ride.
Well, maybe we'll start there in the snowboard game. Like, we probably it seems like we're around similar ages. We're under 50 and we're not 12. Um, you know, there hasn't the percentage of talented humans who get out and transition safely and evolve to stay within the thing that they love is very small. The drop off percentage from within 12 to 24 months after either being pro or having a direct in is extremely high. How has it been safely, I guess, transitioning, waking up now in 2021 and being directly attached to the thing which helped got you there in the first place? Because I think you're probably maybe the 1% of the 1% that's made it the way through. And then now you're an adult with a nice beard and you're still surviving in the game of action sports, which is crazy because then when you add on top of it as well, the dip of the '08 recession crash, whatever, now we've got this COVID thing where you're almost living through these memorable like world events, but still within the same space of where you come from. So how does it feel to become part of the culture for such a long time?
It honestly, hearing someone say it out loud, it's a little bit of a pinch yourself moment, right? I mean, I don't think about that every day, and I should think about that more. And I am super super grateful for where I am. But I think you touched on a lot of really great points there, and I think the first one is that I never had any sort of intention to be a pro snowboarder because I just knew that just wasn't in the cards, right? And I think that
You went through that
realistic
before.
mindset. I think that mindset really just helped me be like, okay, I got to find another way in, right? Like, how am I going to get involved without being the rider? Because I know that's just not in the cards. I'm just being realistic here, right? And I always loved snowboarding, and I think so. Another part of that is growing up on the East Coast, right? And um, I think East Coasters have that special something in the water, that drive, that mentality. I don't know if it was being raised like that or being born there or, the New York City hustle. I think that's part of it, growing up outside the city. Um, I never really stopped being hungry. I never stopped working. I never stopped putting in the time. And I still do things that I think are paying my dues now, even though maybe a lot of people in this position might not think that, right? I think, you know, I've spent time painting and building skate ramps for projects. I've spent time, building stuff on site. There's all these different things that you just do because it's got to get done, right? And I think that mentality has helped me quite a bit through the years. And then I think the other thing you mentioned is you see that drop off right after at the time after the pro, right? And I think this new crop of athletes, this new generation, is quickly seeing that. They're learning from the past and they're making adjustments, right? They're doing things like they're starting podcasts, they're starting websites, they're getting involved with brands, they're starting brands. There's all these different things they're investing. These were not always things that former pros did, and you can really see the successful ones now. And unfortunately, you have to have some of the ones who were unsuccessful to learn from those mistakes. So all of those points, I think, are kind of the new era of that snowboard athlete as well as snowboard industry.
Well, look, you touched on a good point there, Justin, around the fact of athletes themselves having to zoom out and not think of themselves necessarily as a person, but as a platform. Jay-Z's always got that line, "I ain't a business man, I'm a business man." and going from person to platform creates that sort of scalability. And one of the thing, if you rewind back, like we had Mark Frank Montoya on the show and talking about, he was probably one of the top 3 branded individuals that understood the business side of how to position within the marketplace. But then simultaneously, I think and that was in the time when everyone was getting checks for hundreds of thousands all over the show and people becoming millionaires. It's different now, right? You tune on the Olympic and you've got, iPod with a blank board, and you've got, a bunch of these top riders that are only barely even making a living. They're just like hardly almost surviving with unsponsored and these top crew in the world. So by default, the survivor, the pure, commercial survival element for them has had to make them be more creative and more understanding. But then maybe a good little segue the other way. Do you think from a brand's perspective, if I look back in the game, it was talent first and then let's blow you up, right? Like, hey, you were epic, now let's make you famous. And the way you made famous was almost by default because you buy into a MacDog film, or you're in the, you shoot with Scott Service and you're on the front cover of Trans World, whatever the thing may be. But now it's, how many followers do you have? What's your engagement rate? It's a data conversation, right? So what's your take on maybe the commercial element around how talent has been commercialized within snowboarding, and how you feel that's changed maybe over the last 10 to 15 years? Because I definitely think the energy of the athlete is going potentially in a bit of a different direction that's driven by data and dollars, not necessarily by passion and talent. But I'll be really intrigued on your take, because you've been able to see the world from the inside and out from within it.
Sure. Yeah. And there's a lot of great points there. And I think, to start, I think Instagram was really that great equalizer, right? And before, as a kid, I would pour through the pages of Transworld and I would read about my favorite pros and see the photos and learn about the movies and then go to the shop and buy them, right? That is just not really a thing anymore, unfortunately. As much as I hate that it's true, it's just the nature of the beast at this point. And the thing about YouTube and Instagram is that instantaneous ability to connect with athletes. I mean, I can get on Instagram and post a comment to my favorite snowboarder and they'll probably see it. That just wasn't a thing before. And so now, where I think most athletes were expected to film all season to put out a video part and maybe do a catalog shoot, that is no longer the case, right? And it hasn't been for quite some time. You have to post on Instagram, you have to show up to events, you have to compete, you have to not put out one video part, you have to put out a vlog or something. It's become a lot more work. And so not only were they getting paid more to do less, that's what it was. They're getting paid more to do less. And now, this again, after 2008, I saw the physical representation of this that really hit home with me, was that you saw the magazines shrinking physically in size, and the weight of them, and how many I could fit in a box was a very visual reminder of what happened around that time. And that was kind of right before I got my first full-time job in the industry. I mean, I was interning and doing and kind of dipping my toes in the water, but so I didn't get to I missed the glory days by like by like a little bit, and I always try to think about that. But from then on, in my experience, it was always thin budgets. What can we do? What can we make happen? How can we stretch the dollar? And I think unfortunately that translated to athletes where they were bearing the brunt of the budgets, right? And the amount of money that was being spent on these athletes. And then people got forced to really recognize, all right, what's the ROI? Are they moving product? Are they going to move the needle at the end of the day where we're getting a return on that investment? Because from a business sense, that's what it is at the end of the day. And I like to joke that pro athletes were the original influencers, right? And you would never call, would you ask a pro snowboarder, are you an influencer? And what would their answer be? Because it's highly debatable, right? They have these incredible, amazing talents, but also are commanding these presences on Instagram that sometimes outweigh the brands themselves, right? So the value is always in flux, and you can make that argument either way. But I think it's just an interesting talking point to think about.
I remember David Benedict had a interview in one of the magazines talking about the death of the DVD, and in it he basically talked about the time gap in the real world of, exactly to point, Justin, work all season for a video part comes out, do the tour, get your flip and check, right off into the sunset. Forum does the full page ad, Solomon does the full page ad, and you're off to the races. Thanks for coming. That's my season done. But the timing of vlogs, webisodes, you know, the 411s of the world, all the rest of it, it definitely changed that. I remember he predicted it and he said it early, because what came after it was essentially the crumbling of the, you know, brands having to pay the Mac Dogs $50K to get a rider in a spot or whatever it may be. And it just was like, no, we'll do our own team movie now. Oh, okay. Well, we'll just take that film and Justin, and we'll just do that, and we'll just get that crew. And it felt like the vehicles that were the middlemen got pushed out because the brands realized they had the power themselves and they could control the narrative themselves, right? And then when you look at exactly 2.4, Justin, you're talking about, you know, say Instagram, that instantaneous feel of they could just literally just go live whenever. There was no hidden secrets. And in New Zealand, anyway, we had, you know, NZ Snowboarder magazine, and then I had the website nzsnowboard.com. And my idea was saying, well, if this comes out sporadically as if it was a journal 3 times a year, what is all the B-roll and the filler? Like, what's crafting that narrative on an ongoing basis? And there was a bit of a disconnect strategically, and it sucks because the mag isn't, I guess, there anymore. But when you see the impact of technology directly into sport, net, do you feel that it has been a help or a hindrance to the ecosystem? Take away, I guess, the commercial factors of recession. Has technology helped or hurted the game?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it depends on how you look at it, right? From a dollars and cents standpoint, I haven't seen the latest data. I kind of don't probably check in on the SIA reports as much as I should anymore. But you know, I would be willing to bet that the overall marketplace for snow sports in general has grown, and I think that has probably a great deal to do with the availability of that content to the masses. So your Instagrams, your Facebooks, your YouTubes, now with TikTok. I mean, these are all platforms that are reaching a wider audience than those physical print magazines ever possibly could. It just, you can't even compare it. It's not even close. So I think by virtue of getting to the masses and bringing in these outside audiences to grow the sport, I mean, that at the end of the day, I think is always the goal. That was always the goal at the magazine. And I would argue that we were very successful in that. By diversifying into those digital avenues. And to your other point, you know, the brands taking things in house. I mean, that was a huge thing that I experienced personally. And then very quickly, I think a lot of brands realized, wow, this is a lot of work. No wonder we used to farm this out, you know. And it's those production companies, the Mac Dogs of the world. I mean, they have been doing it for such a long time. This is something that they are very, very good at and very experienced at. And when issues or problems arise, they know how to handle it because they've done it before. And when you've got, you know, a young kid who's doing marketing at a brand who's never done this before, there's things that you need to kind of figure out on your own. So totally great points. I think that you know, those guys are the greats because they've done it, and they continue to do it, and they've found ways to adapt to the new landscapes.
I think the point there, which you make, Justin, which I would agree with, is it was clear that at a certain point, the people themselves, like if you look at pro athletes potentially being the influencers, the people actually became more powerful than the platforms, right? Oh, well, you sell 10,000 copies. That's great. I've got 100,000 people, which I can just get to by saying going live. And I've got in 3 minutes a bigger reach than I'm paying you to. Why do I need to pay you? Stuff you. Simultaneously, when there's a documentary called Push, Pause, Play, talks about like kind of the world of creativity and stuff. But one of the things they talked about was when everyone does the same thing, nothing stands out and actually devalues everything in the whole market. And I wonder, in a weird way, because obviously the top is obviously getting still the most, but then the gap's getting bigger for everyone else that doesn't get shit, was actually thinking about if the business itself of action sports was so reliant on this, in a weird way, is the modern world of action sports become almost like college sports in America, where there's so many people that are doing it for free, but then there's commercialization of the brand of businesses at top. Like, let's say hypothetically the army doesn't give a shit who flipping any of these crew are, but they know, oh, well, if everyone's doing it and there's so much free content out and they're getting inspired from everywhere, A, we don't need to pay for it, B, we can just own at the macro. Do you think the relationships of how sponsors or brands think of action sports has actually changed over 10 years just by default, because so many more people are doing it and getting inspired without actually having to pay. Does that make sense? Like, just I'm just looking at the from a brand side.
It does make sense. I understand the question. I think there's always, I mean, photographers and filmers and lots of different people experience this every day, where there's always going to be someone willing to do it for less, right? And you have to balance that as a brand, and you have to understand that the people that are commanding these premiums command them for a reason. You're going to get what you pay for, right? And I think a lot of times, again, when you have no budget and you're just willing to do whatever it takes to stretch that as far as possible to reach as many people as possible, sometimes you take side routes, you take shortcuts, and maybe that means signing up some AMs to the team, more AMs than sometimes pros. I think you see that a lot, where you're just trying to get out there, you're trying to find that new talent. So it's definitely a balancing act, right? And I've seen it before where you could totally hire some college kid or some younger person that has less experience maybe shooting photos, but when you get those back at the end of the day, you're going to see a difference between the heavy hitters and from that lower end. And so I think it usually takes a few times for people and marketers to experience that and really see the physical difference of the output. And what's also great is that you will get that instantaneous feedback on your platforms, right? If you put out a shitty video or a photo, people are going to let you know really quick, right? And is it worth it, right? Is it worth it to save a few bucks on this and then potentially damage your reputation as a brand, reputation with different people in the industry? You have to weigh all of that, right? And I think, again, it's just as someone who's been in it long enough, I can recognize that. But for maybe newer people coming up, it just takes a little bit of time, and maybe they won't even have to deal with that, right? Things are changing so rapidly. It's like, especially with things like Instagram ads and Facebook ads and being able to grow a brand so quickly, there's different ways to spend that money that didn't really exist before. So now you're kind of being bombarded with all these options, and it's up to you to make the choice of what the best way to move forward is.
Well, if you look at some of the brands that came through the early 2000s, which were funded by soy sauce companies and these crazy other shit that had nothing to do with it, the difference of the external visuals were quite substantial if you understood snowboarding. Just buying some random, just chucking a logo up there, someone doing some air. Those that are paying for it don't know the difference. Those in the Getty Images don't know the difference between a Tindy and an Indy and a Taipan and a flippin' right? That's just like, dude in sky, sell product. And so I think you're right. It's the which maybe comes back the other way of my kind of thesis with media was always, every brand is going to become its own media company, control everything from end to end, including distribution. But the difference will always be the creative, the brand, the story, the strategic thinking, the glue in the middle. So in some ways, it gives value back to the art, which is quite cool for sport. Because if you look at, snowboarding itself, of the Jamie Lyns of the world and whatever it may be, the art that they put into things, the way they craft it, and you're at the narrative, the story, it potentially just means, maybe could be wrong, but the creativity will always be that variable, which makes me feel a lot more stoked for the future of these type of brands and sports, because the fly-by-nighters, the one-night standers, they're going to piss off and bail because they're not going to get the cut through the traction. They don't know the nuances, and actually, instead of sort of building depth. So when you look at, maybe we'll go business side for a second. When you look at, say, the snowboard companies of the early 2000s versus today, 20 years later, what do you think the biggest shift has actually been from the headspace around brand themselves that's doing physical and hard product, when they look at the ecosystem of starting a business in 2000 with the JP Walkers of the world, or starting a business in 2020 with the Sages or whoever it may be?
That's a great question. I can't decide what I think is the biggest difference. I think obviously the marketing outlets, is huge. It's way less print dependent, way more digital focused, obviously, and that goes without saying now. But again, 10 years ago, it was definitely a new aspect. I think teams, team riders, pro team riders, unfortunately, are starting to become less important, right? You can hire some influencer, again, with hundreds of thousands of followers, and the amount of pros at that level with that level of following and influence is low comparatively, right? I think that's a huge conversation. Unfortunately, I hate that. I don't, it brings me no pleasure to talk about, right? But again, those pros are getting better at diversifying it and providing more value in those different ways,
Is
other
that,
than just being really, really good.
I was going to say,
What's up?
does it make you feel upset because you feel their talent has been devalued commercially for what they're bringing? Because some flipping Chachi from down the street can just roll up that does like bicep curls at the gym or some shit, be like, I'm going snowboarding, I'm going to buy this Burden 5.5 Hero, whatever the flipping thing is. Do you, is that the passionate piece in you that's like, no, the art and soul of the talent? Or commercially, it's like, what the fuck? Like, why are we doing all this shit if maybe there's, you know, like if Elon Musk just goes shredding and he goes, oh, I rode a Burton, like,
Mm-hmm.
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, is it like an emotional sort of hold from the past of what you wish it was like yesteryear, like people talking about the phone books and, you know, being home before it got dark and shit, you know,
Yeah.
are you being sensitive, I guess?
It's both. You know, I hate to admit that it's both, but it is, right? I mean, there's the kid in me that I always reference when I'm trying to, you know, make some kind of decision that I think, you know, like would 15-year-old calf be hyped on this? And I try to reflect on that sometimes when I can to kind of keep myself in check, but also there's the business side, there's the reality of things, right? And it's hard to justify you know, some sort of payment and a lower ROI versus the same payment, right, to someone else, to something else, and that has a higher ROI from a business standpoint. I think making too many decisions based on passion and gut will lead to your downfall, essentially, right? And I think a lot of decisions like that were made in different parts of the industry, and now we see the kind of fallout, right? We see the aftermath of that, unfortunately, and that's just the reality of things, right? There's always that, as a snowboarder myself, that gut feeling, that passion is what guides me through the vast majority of what I do. But you have to balance it with that business sense in order to be successful, right? You can make a great core, awesome company, and it's going to stay small the entire time, and you're going to be, you know, the chorus of the core. But it depends on your um, what your goals are at the end of the day, right? Do you want to grow and make this thing huge and sell it and retire on a beach someplace, or do you want to just be holding the core flag? I'm not saying either one is right or wrong, right? It's just a matter of what you want to do.
I was watching a documentary on Netflix last night called What We Built or What We Made, and it was the history of EDM. And a really interesting thing, obviously, like, you know, I don't really go to raves at all, but I'm always intrigued with, you know, the commercialization of creativity. I'm always really intrigued on that. And there was a section in the video that literally talked about this, of the underground versus the mainstream, of keeping it core. And it's like, yeah, well, no one's heard of you. You're still pretty much broke. And then this dude's stacked. So like, cool, man, you can keep it real working full time until you're 80. But, and I'm not saying, you know, just go sell out, but there was always, I mean, even within sports and stuff, there was always very much not a sellout mentality, but this, yeah, maybe sellout was the word. Like, I remember when I just before I moved over to Burton, a bunch of the crew were like, and this would have been 2007, 8. They're like, oh man, dude, you got to sell out, bro. You're going to the big dog, sell out, man, blah, blah. And I remember I sat down with Guy who's the CEO of Burton at the time in New Zealand, and he goes, so what's your hair? I said, look, man, because we were going to do like create a rookie program to get like more young bucks into it. And I was kind of like mentor or whatever. And I was just really passionate about it. And then he goes, so just talk me through this. So they're giving you shit for selling out. I'm like, yeah, just that's like, they're going to call me a sellout. And he goes, okay, cool. And like, just like hypothetically, just like what brands would they ride for? Like what were the names of the brands? And I was like, oh, you know, like, you know, DC and this. And they're like, oh, okay, cool. Let's just say DC. Okay, who owns DC? I'm like, oh, I think I bought for Quicksilver. Okay, cool. So a surfers own the snowboard company and they're giving you shit. And I was like, yeah. He's like, well, who owns that surf company? Oh, it's public. He's like, oh, okay, cool. So, and what hedge fund has got a big share in that? Like, and he literally, like, because, you know, you're young and you're kind of going through it. And then he's like, so you're telling me that some suits in New York who've never snowboarded in their life, who own this company, which is a surf company, who then has bought this company, and they rode for that company, but a core, but then you, and he's like, who owns Burton? I'm like, oh, Jake. How many, does Jake snowboard? Yeah. How many days? 100. And where does he live? Vermont. And what does he do? Snowboard. Who else owns it? No one. So who's keeping, and it was just this mind-blowing moment where I realized, wait a second, the narrative was, the perception was so different from the reality when you actually got into the trenches and actually asked why. And I just,
100%.
I wonder about the sport of action sports, with like how many decisions have been made around this core gut that actually isn't core whatsoever. If you look in surf, with everything being consolidated and all the rest of it. So maybe down that road for a second, when you look at the content game, obviously, you know, content director of the Dew Tour, in a nutshell, what is the biggest challenge that you have to try and achieve for the whole thing? Like, you've come through Burden, you've smacked that, big growth, gone this. In a nutshell, what's the biggest commercial challenge that you have driving the content side from Dew Tour with what it does and how it operates? Because I think it's going to be a pretty interesting thing to get into.
Sure. Wow, where do I start? I think the biggest one for us is, you know, at the end of the day, we want to be creating engagement with the fans, right? Because that's what spurs growth and awareness of the brand. And that, at the end of the day, is what we're trying to do in very simple terms. So I think you're overwhelmed sometimes with platform decision. What platform should I be on? Should I be on all of them? TikTok, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, Clubhouse, you know, remember Periscope, like all of this different stuff. Like it seems like we've been lucky, right? Over the past few years, there hasn't been a lot of new stuff. And then in the past year or so, it's like, boom, all of a sudden this explosion, Snapchat, all of these things. What do you do? And then how do you do it? Right. And I see a lot of brands just do the same thing over all the platforms, which is something that you never want to do. But to take the time and the effort to create content specifically for each platform, for the one that it's designed for, like, that takes time, effort, and ultimately money, right? I think the joke is you can never have enough time or money for anything to get things done. And if you do have enough of those things, you can literally do anything. So, you know, formulating a specific plan is always something that I focus a lot of time on. What are we going to do, and how are we going to do it, and where, right? It sounds straightforward, but there's different opinions, there's different things, there's people asking questions about the new flavor of the week, how you're going to address this or that. And it's really a matter of staying focused and finding the things that work and capitalizing on them, and finding ways to recreate that success. Because if you can do that, you basically solve the puzzle, which is essentially a very simple version of how I succeed so much at Burton. I was kind of given the keys to the kingdom, the Instagram account. No, it wasn't a huge focus for them just yet, but they were willing to let me work on that. And basically, through trial and error, I found what worked and just kept doing it and doing it and doing it until I had, you know, doubled, tripled their social following to like whatever 600, 700K at the time, which was, you know, years ago. Now they're at over 1.3 or something like that. And that's really the formula to success. It's not a secret. It's just a matter of being willing to fail at things and try new stuff, which a lot of people just aren't. And I think that's the first thing that you really got to be willing to do is try stuff and be willing to say, yeah, I messed that up. Sorry, I won't do it again. You know, mistakes are the way to learn what not to do. And I think in marketing, it's discouraged to make mistakes like that because of potential blowback and things like that. But if you're in an environment that allows you to do that, I think that's where you're going to see the most success.
So on that, right, I think that multiple platforms mean multiple outputs instead of just copy pasting creative across, you know, the flipping 30-second TVC dropping on YouTube, which drops on Instagram. It's like blah, 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 because then you're not speaking the language of those platforms. It gets harder and harder as time goes on because as more platform comes out, there needs to be more different creative lenses for each of the different external content executions, right? So which brings you to the next point, which is the biggest handbrake of most organizations. Anytime you get size, you lack speed. And anytime it comes to creative output, potentially of multiple channels in real time for a bunch of different stuff, can you talk me through from a winning, obviously you've got a winning formula for it, what your circle of creative creation, data insight, retweak, recreate, just talk me through that little spin wheel of how you see it working. Because imagine after you've got that blueprint, that's what you roll down, because 90% of probably other brands don't probably have that same type of engine or formula, because usually HR and legal, PR and marketing and blah, 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 blah. And so nothing actually gets done. So what's your formula for speed in terms of big brand content creation in 2021?
Sure. So you'd be surprised. Our Dew Tour team is pretty nimble and smaller comparatively to a lot of brands out there, which is great. And I knew that going into it, and that's part of the reason why I gravitated gravitated to it so much was, being able, but there's that trade-off, right? Typically smaller teams, there's more work to do. There's more hands-on work. I don't mind that. I love doing that stuff personally. So not a problem. But if you're the type of person that likes to oversee mostly, then a lot of times this isn't going to work for you, because you have to be digging around in the analytics. You have to know how to look at certain things in Google Analytics and Instagram, and what to look for, and those KPIs, like things that a lot of people don't think about, like shares and saves on Instagram are two huge KPIs that a lot of people don't talk about, because they're sort of hidden on the back end. But if you get that hands-on experience, I think that's a huge component of it. And so I'm lucky in that sense, right? Where I'm used to that. I've been doing it for so long that I just naturally gravitate towards that work, and I'm curious. And I think that's really helped quite a bit. As far as that formula, it's really, I like to really batch out my content in franchises and identify the need that it fills, right? So we came up with this new web series called Aimless for Dew Tour, probably about a year ago. I think we launched it a little bit before the 2019 Skate Long Beach event. And basically that was, okay, we want to get to know the athletes better. We want to get more personality in the mix, and we want a long form edit for YouTube, because we're lacking that. And the goal is to grow the YouTube, right? So you really got to start from, what are you trying to accomplish? And what does success look like? Because a lot of people don't have those measurable goals in place. And it's like kind of a business 101 thing, but it's easy to forget, right? It's the only reason I'm really harping on it now is because I've been taking some refresher classes and things like that. And it's really nice to get back to the basics of, okay, what are we doing and why? And that really lets you hone in on, is it working? How do you answer that question? And do we keep doing it? Yes or no? Or do we need to tweak little aspects? Are there improvements? Are there things that we can change to make it better? And then you try that. And it's really just that kind of framework, overly simplified, of course, because there's always so many variables, right? And that's what we run into a lot of times, is what is the variable that we need to tweak? Is it the copy? Is it the social media cut downs? Is it too action heavy? Is it not action heavy enough? Does it need subtitles? How's it cropped? What platform is it on? All of these things, it becomes a bit overwhelming. So you really need to focus in on, again, what is success? What are our channels that we can focus on without getting overwhelmed by, trying to post to 8, 10 different things at once, and try to tweak one thing at a time. I mean, it's just like any other variable test, right? You try to change one thing at a time. You try to change the headline or the copy or the thumbnail image, whatever it is. And you try these different things to see what works and what doesn't. And you get that instantaneous feedback, which is really, really valuable on those platforms organically, right? So yes, you're paying for the time and energy of creating this content. You're doing all that stuff, but it's not like a paid ad where you're paying money for the right to test things. You can test it for free on the platform. That's kind of the whole point, right? And if you find something that works, you can then expand that into paid advertising efforts as well. So it's really, it affects all areas of the business, and it really stems from your.
Are you there, mate? Justin's
frozen. Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, I got you. You just froze for a second. No, it's all good. So hey, I'll maybe just follow up on that last question. When you were at Burton and it was winning, what was the bit that you found that worked, that then rolled out as the kind of main data that you used to rinse and repeat? Like, what was the hook that you kind of or used?
Honestly, is our connection okay? I think I keep cutting out.
You good?
Honestly, it's super simple. It was just cool snowboarding stuff. and it seems really maybe obvious now, but there weren't a ton of accounts at that time that had the ability to put out the consistent amount of content. I think it was the sheer volume of it. I was posting like, I don't know, I think there were some days I'd post like 6 to 10 times a day, every few hours, because back then the way that the algorithm worked was you wanted to get on the popular page, right? And that's kind of like what the explore page is now. But now the popular page is something that the Instagram algorithm, which was much more simpler back then, because there were less inputs to determine ranking, was the pinnacle. And if you got on that, you got in front of everyone. So everyone on Instagram basically saw that. Again, it's been a while, so I don't really remember if it was interest based or not, but the algorithm was very, very, very simple compared to now. It was likes and comments, right? And I think videos had just started to kind of be a thing. So it was all photo based. You couldn't post multi photos. I mean, it was so much simpler. And so that was really, made it easy for me to identify, okay, if I just dig into the archives of Burton, which are, 40 years deep, 30 years deep, whatever it was at the time, I have this amazing trove of iconic imagery that I can pick from. It was just this perfect storm, right? Like, I don't know if I could recreate that if I tried. But it was like, okay, here's everything, go nuts. And they gave me the freedom to do that. And luckily it worked. So a bit of luck, a bit of hard work, but a bit of all of those kind of things coming together.
Got it. The you spoke on algorithm there, Justin. It's clear that this thing that is the algorithm is such a massive driver for content creators to almost reverse engineer, what they should create, how they should create it. And if you look at the top ones out there, the Mr. Beasts of the world and whatever it may be, they're reverse engineering human psychology and like just, it's not just creative. It almost feels like it's data first, creative next to those things. When you think about the algorithm, or you look at that in terms of brands now trying to get out, what are your, I guess, top line macro thoughts on the battle versus the algorithm for eyeballs and attention without paying for it? How is this? It's become almost the like the wind. You can't see it, but it's there, and it can have a big, big, big effect on you if it goes the wrong way.
It's a great analogy, honestly. And again, having been doing this for whatever 10 years now, I saw the firsthand decline of that organic reach, every day. And it's like 10% here, 12% there. Every year it just got a little bit less and less until you weren't getting those big numbers that you really used to. Because they were forced to monetize, and we were in that golden age of, hey, we have unlimited money, do whatever, this is great, we're just building the platform, Instagram's so fun, you put a cool filter on it and it's all good. And now it's, look how far we've come. It's night and day. So it depends, again, how successful you want to be. You can ignore the algorithm and just do whatever you want, and you probably won't be very successful. But there are some people that are really, really good at that. Like for example, I love the way that Crab Grab runs their Instagram. I think Preston took like a year off posting and just didn't care, and it didn't matter. And I don't think I've seen another example of that being successful in the industry. And I love that he's doing that, because it shows people, hey, there's another option. You don't have to, beat yourself up every day trying to figure out something to post. I can post a picture of a crab with a knife in his hand, and it's going to get just as much engagement as some insane trick. And I love that. I think it's great. I love his copy. I love his approach to everything. I'm a big fan of how they've been doing things. So, I mean, but that's the only example I can think of. I can't think of anyone else that's been able to just say, we're going to do whatever we want and be successful. There always is some element of being tactical in terms of what you're providing. And to me, that falls under a few categories. You're providing information, entertainment, or education. It's kind of one of the, or aspirational type content. And those can all be kind of intermixed, or they all sort of mean the same thing. But you're providing a value to your customers, which are your followers, right? Without forcing a transaction. It's almost like the give sell method kind of situation, right? If you're familiar with that. So you're providing value up until the point where, for a lot of brands, let's be real, you're building that follower base to eventually turn them into sales, right? You're looking for conversions at the end of the day. If you're not paying for something, you're the product, right? That's the reason you're getting all these Gmail ads and things like that. That's why Facebook's free. You are the product at the end of the day, and it sucks, but that's just the nature of the beast, right? So engaging with those folks and building that rapport is super important, without beating them over the head with like, buy now, click here, do this, do that. And it's all about that balance, right? So at the end of the day, you need to figure out, again, what are my goals here? Do I just want to build a really cool community and I'm never going to ask them to buy any of my product? Or are you going to sneak a few sale messages in there at the end of the day to make sure that you can keep the lights on? It totally depends on the end goal.
Well, it becomes that thing of keeping it real, man. It's it's like that's cool until rent's due on the 20th, and if there ain't dollars there, you're kind of stuffed. So when you think about the intersection between, let's say, commerce and this content that it sort of exists online when it comes to communities and stuff, what's your headspace on where the future of e-commerce is heading with content, either direct online on social or whatever? Because it seems like there's these things that have been built, either the brands are sponsoring stuff to then build community to sell stuff, or they've just got communities that then do it. But there's this intersection of content and commerce. What's your take on that space right now coming into 2021?
I mean, we're just going to continue to see it grow, and we're going to continue to see the integration of content distribution platforms allowing people to grow their commerce, right? And we see it on YouTube. You can put your own merchant in your own YouTube channel and videos and ads. Facebook is huge. It is the gateway to Instagram, which recreated its landing page to focus on selling stuff. Companies like Etsy are getting massive. There's merchandise and commerce is always going to be part of that content experience, and even more so going forward, because there's ways to diversify those revenue streams, right? If I can tag a product in a post and get someone to click on it and buy it on Instagram, rather than selling it to a shop and then having them sell it and dealing with that. I mean, there's definitely the different ways to look at it, but from a margin perspective, if you're selling direct, that's the best way to go if you're just looking to make dollars, right? And again, as a snowboarder who grew up going into snowboard shops and looking at the product and touching it and talking to the sales people and trying boots on and watching the videos, like that was the core of my experience. And I think a lot of that is being lost, unfortunately. And it sucks, but then it's kind of falling to those retailers to recreate that experience and find ways to get people in the doors. Obviously with COVID, that's incredibly difficult. And that was not a setback that anybody wanted. But I think even brands like Snowboarder Mag with their free press program started to support the shops. They were like, hey, you can go to the shop and get a free copy of the magazine just by going there. You don't have to buy anything. You can just do it. And that was their give back to the core shop community, which I was a huge fan of, because no one had really been doing that on a scale or a level I think that they really did. So it's really about, if you're a brand, can you support the shops? Is that a relationship that's important to you? And that can really dictate a lot of your decisions as well.
Well, if we take the same lens on it of what happened within the influencer side of pro athletes for it, the people became bigger than the platforms. So now if you look at the retail space, and if, Johnny Two Shoes from down in Venice Beach goes shred and it's like, hey, click here to buy this board. Do you feel that the future of retail is genuinely at risk now, because not from other brands or online, but actually from potential people themselves going direct with their own stuff? And obviously, if you look at the growth of influencer stuff on, say, Amazon and affiliate partnerships and with all these different bits and pieces, is the same thing not true? Instead of visually looking at it from media, what happened is actually people going into the stores. Because in the day, if you get 300 people through your stores, but if you've got 10, 20, 30,000 followers, is the risk for retail actually people that go direct with brands?
It is 100%. And I think it is on the consumer as well. I guess it's not 100% fair to put it all on the brands, but I think it's mostly on their shoulders, but yeah, I mean, they say vote with your dollar, right? And that it still rings true. But I think you mentioned something really important as well, where all these other brands coming out of the woodwork, a lot of these brands, are not tested, not trusted, not known. Yeah, you can get a cheap pair of goggles on Amazon, but you don't know where these things came from. You don't know how they were tested, if they're shatterproof, if they're safe. And that's a much bigger discussion about Amazon as a whole, and lots of other online retailers that allow third-party stuff. And that's a whole nother, again, discussion. But I think the brands that have put in the work to make sure that their marketing reflects, why you're paying that premium, and what the benefits are. I mean, they're really going to have to continue to double down on that to set themselves apart from these cheap online competitors. But on the other hand, there are brands that are coming up that are doing this decentralized model, this online only model that allows them to shave costs and things like that. So they're being very competitive. Again, not familiar with a lot of their quality and things like that personally, so I can't really speak to that. But that is an advantage, right? To maybe that they're drop shipping, they don't have a warehouse, or they're not using distributors, or they're only selling direct, and all of those things add up, and it's threatening these older business models where those brands are going to really have to adapt to the new landscape and figure out, all right, how was business done in 2021? We can't keep doing it like we did in 2010.
Totally agree. When you look at the action sports world of, say, the G Tour now coming into its future, how much of a driver, or what's your approach differently to how you approach, the Adventure Sports Network, Dew Tour? Like, what's top of mind with when you think about the biggest thing that you need to crush in this next 12 or 24 months?
Oh man, our first event back. It's been a year. It's been a year since. I'm sorry.
What was the first one that got cancelled before the break? You said it's been off for a year. Was it the skate in LA? What was the event?
Yeah, it was going to be the May 2020 skate event. Got postponed essentially till now. It got postponed twice. We were going to try to do it in September, and that clearly didn't happen. So, and then we were supposed to do a winter event in February as well. So we postponed the same event twice and another one once. So those will all, fingers crossed, take place this year.
So the maybe from a sponsorship side, obviously the world of every single event and sport and everything sort of went to zero. How much legal paperwork and back end in terms of sponsorship dollars and lost opportunity and revenue not has gone out the door, but how have brands how have brands safeguarded their investments for sponsorships, and then how have events tried to de-risk their own cash flow positions through that sponsorship, which is required to keep the team going to try and do the events, which may not happen? Because that's probably a new dance which no one's probably had to ever have before, right?
Sure, and unfortunately, I can't speak to that 100%. I don't really handle the partnerships, paperwork type thing day to day. I come in and execute on branded content with them, usually after the fact. But what I will say is that our sponsors have been so gracious with us, and in working with us to figure out a way to make it work and make it beneficial for everyone involved, because they're scrambling, changing plans, we're scrambling, changing plans, and it's been this really great. It's been a partnership, right? We've worked with a lot of these brands for years, and they understand that this is a kind of a new world, especially for experiential. And they've been really great, and a lot of them have been looking to us to kind of lead the way for, okay, so how is the on-site activation going to work? Where is it going to be? What are the protocols? How are we going to do this? And we really work on that collaboratively with them, and it's honestly been a really great experience. We did get to execute a really cool online only program with Tech Deck over the summer that turned into one of our most engaged with social activations, which was a head-to-head bracket style fingerboard contest, all judged through Instagram and things like that. We had some pros judging it and all of that, and they were stoked, and we were stoked, because it was this cool way to get people psyched while encouraging them to stay home, and it ended up being very, very successful. So things like that, when we're really able to collaborate again with these brands and work on things that are beneficial for both parties, that's the best case scenario.
So what you touch on there is leveraging tech for live streaming, like real-time engagement and connection between the community itself. When you look at the world of live streaming when it comes to content, it's come a long way since the first ones that existed, all the way through to now the plethora of everything that exists everywhere, where you can almost, I think you can have a flipping GoPro in one hand, your phone in your pocket, that streaming to Facebook, whatever that thing may be. When you look at especially when it comes to action sports, when you think of live streaming, where do you see the future of live streaming in terms of not only just creativity, but also commerce going in the next 3 to 5 years?
That's a great question. You've got, a content creation device in your pocket at all times, which is you have to kind of appreciate the gravity of that, right? I mean, you can be up in live streaming with a push of a button to potentially thousands, hundreds of thousands of people, given the right platform. So it's really, I've seen a lot of interest in what equipment people are using. So that's always something that we get asked a lot. What camera is that? What lenses? What drone? Those types of things, because people are interested in doing that stuff themselves. And you touched on it earlier, right? The creativity and all of that is that I can't quite decide how I feel about it, but I saw it written someplace recently that was like, when are we going to stop monetizing all of our hobbies, right? Like as someone who enjoys photography, um, you know, do you necessarily have to go out with the intention of getting paid, or can you just do it because you enjoy it? And that's a bigger conversation about society, I think, as a whole, needing all these side hustles and income streams and things as a regular person, not even as a brand, is again a whole nother story. But people are more interested in doing this stuff themselves and how to do it. And kids want to grow up to be YouTubers and things. And so we're seeing this incredible shift of what's possible. And at the end of the day, it's, why are you trying to do that? What's the new dream? What's the new success metric? Is it to live in a van and drive around and create content and not have to sit at a desk? A lot of people would say, yes, that is it. So how do I get to that point? And you're selling that idea now. You're selling that lifestyle of the digital nomad, right? That's a new term that didn't exist a few years ago that I would probably laugh at, because, hey, can I work from home? Your boss would be like, no, like, come to the office. What are you doing? Now, that's not even a conversation that you have to have. You're like, hey, I've been doing this for a year. I've got it pretty dialed. Like, doesn't really matter where I am as long as I hop on the Zoom calls for XYZ time. But I think I got a little lost in the question there. But I think at the end of the day, being able to create that content and show how it's done, and then what the products those people are using, is always going to be a huge motivation for commerce, right? Because the whole point of getting athletes to ride certain boards is to be like, hey, what board is that? Where can I get it? I mean, that's it distilled down very simply, I think. But damn, that jacket's sick. I would love to buy that. That's really what you're trying to do at the end of the day, I think.
Yeah, I get it. Well, I was just thinking when you realize you weren't going to be a pro, but you had to try and find your way into it, that was like your experience going through it. Now, some data came out last year and they were saying that there are more teenage Americans that want to be YouTubers when they grow up instead of astronauts. And then, like, obviously, it's a secondary conversation of more potentially chasing the byproducts of likes and girls and parties and coolness, or whatever that kind of status thing is. But there is this kind of creative boom which is happening, because if you look at all of the exactly as you're saying, Justin, you've got a phone in your pocket which can do it. My brain sort of went to, okay, well, if you know that there's this creative boom happening around, you've got this community of the talent which does the thing of due to or whatever, and then you've got this other thing which is the halo effect of, where is that creator community that wants in on that world too? How do you empower those? I'm not saying it's a little creator camp that happens at the Dew Tour with 100 people from around America that come in sponsored by GoPro, but it's very clear that there is a direct correlation between the people who do the thing and then those who help put fuel on the fire through amplification and creativity and whatever it is as well, which is it's kind of an exciting thing, because at the end of this whole COVID thing, the genuine connection that's going to be required and wanted and craved from so many is going to be with people to create. So I actually think there's going to be not only just a community boom in terms of the meshing back into society, but also a massive content boom. Like, I'm with people again, there's some cool shit happening, it's going to be like experience. And so that kind of makes that world even crazier. So when you look at this next phase of this next 12 months to experience, how do you think the experience of event will change dramatically in terms of that future? You're going to double down on different parts around activation and people together. Like, how do you see the future of events as a whole sort of coming back online and existing for a 2.0 version after COVID? Because cruise ships bookings are going to go up, flipping raves and festivals going up. Like, it feels like there's going to be a wave coming your way. How are you kind of planning for the future of growth within the ecosystem?
Sure. That's a great question. I think thankfully I don't need to deal with that. We have a fantastic ops director that handles all of that stuff. I would love for you to speak with her. She's fantastic, and she's dealing with so much more now than we already did to put on this world class event. Right? And it's an Olympic qualifier. It's going to be a pro tour stop, and has huge ramifications for the Olympics now. Right? So everything has to be dialed. Everything has to be buttoned up. So obviously COVID restrictions are changing all of the time, depending on what's happening in the world. And it's a bit outside of our control, but what we can best do is just maintain the safety of guests and spectators. Right. And for me, again, this is not an expert opinion, but I think it's still a lot of probably masks, probably still a lot of distancing, not a lot of handling food or things like that, eating or drinking, ideally. And then, I mean, I would imagine that there'll probably be some sort of, and I'm not saying that we're going to do this or we have any plans to do this, but the vaccine passport that everyone keeps talking about, it's a thing that keeps coming up is, are there going to be parties or concerts that, require you to have a vaccine to enter? Some people will still be allowed to enter, but you still have to wear a mask or something like that. So I think we're going to see that for a long time. And it's really going to be interesting to see how some places deal with it and how quickly we learn from those experiences, how far they're looking to push the envelope, and then what those ramifications are going to be, because we don't quite know yet what exactly is going to happen. But I think people will be very eager to return, especially, those who have been very, very careful about, how they've been handling this whole stay-at-home situation. So it's poised for a big comeback. I just hope that everybody treats it with the seriousness that I think it deserves, and that everybody plays a part in that, whether you're a fan or an artist or a production manager behind the scenes. It's kind of on everyone. I saw a great little thread about, like, your first show back, don't ask to get on the guest list. Pay the damn ticket fee because everyone hasn't been working for a year. Like, don't be a jerk. Like, just all these little things. And I thought that was a great reminder that, everyone's got a little bit of a part to play in all of this.
No better way to finish it, my friend. Justin, I really appreciate your time, dude. I know that you're a busy man, so your time is very much appreciated. Best of luck with the bringing the games back on site, the Dew Tour back in the mix, everyone kind of safely getting this epic machine that is action sports back on track. So I really appreciate your time, dude.
Totally. Thanks so much for having me. This was great.
Awesome, brother. All right, man. I'll talk to you soon.
Sounds good.
Appreciate it. Ladies and gentlemen, Justin Cafiero, content director at the Dew Tour. Great chat, talking through content, life, tech, snowboarding, commerce, content, all the rest of it. Enjoy the day, team. Robett Live, Dash Radio, Dash Talk X.